He came in a broken wheelchair, hoping only for a warm meal. But instead of kindness, 2 employees gave him cruelty, spilling his food and shoving him to the ground while laughing. The cameras were broken, the truth seemed buried, and no one expected justice. Until the company director checked one unexpected source. Under the clear blue sky of a late afternoon, in front of a large tech company's headquarters, the air still hummed with the warmth of a charity meal distribution event. A large banner emblazoned with "Sharing Love, Spreading Hope" still stretched across the entrance, a symbol of a thoughtfully organized act of kindness. Throughout the morning and early afternoon, hundreds of people had come to receive meals, offering grateful smiles and blessings. The company's employees, in their blue uniform t-shirts, were all cheerful, friendly, handing out hot meal boxes with warm eyes. It was assumed that as the sun began to set, the event had reached its end, and no one else would appear. But then, as the last meal boxes were being packed away, and the afternoon light began to fade, a quiet figure emerged from the distance. An elderly black man, over 70 years old, with wispy white hair under an old baseball cap. He didn't walk like the others, he sat in an old, creaky wheelchair, perhaps one that had accompanied him through countless streets, witnessing countless lives. The wheelchair let out faint creaking sounds as he slowly, almost timidly, pushed its wheels, inching towards the company gate where the meal distribution area still held a dim light. His demeanor exuded hardship, yet his eyes held a fragile glimmer of hope. As Walter got closer, a young male employee named Jack, handsome in appearance but with judging eyes, suddenly noticed him. Jack's eyes immediately narrowed. "A black man?" Jack exclaimed, his voice filled with surprise mixed with disdain and coldness. He glanced at his colleague, John, another male employee whose face also showed little warmth. "Be careful," Jack continued, lowering his voice but still loud enough for the old man to hear. "He looks really dirty, he might spread diseases." John, the colleague, immediately agreed, his face clearly showing aversion. "I don't like him just seeing he's black," John said, his tone laced with malice. "I don't understand why people like him are allowed to come here for food." Those words, like needles, pricked the old man's ears. He was accustomed to dismissive glances, to whispers filled with prejudice. But being called dirty and undesirable right at a charity event, a place that should have been brimming with human kindness, made his heart clench. He continued to roll his wheelchair forward, his weathered face attempting a hesitant smile, his hand reaching out, hoping to receive just one small box of food to fill his hungry stomach. The employee John, who was directly distributing the meals, held a hot, fresh meal box. He extended the box towards the old man, but his eyes were filled with disgust, fearing his hand would touch the old man's. That momentary hesitation, though lasting only an instant, was enough to lead to an unexpectedly cruel act. He flinched back in a panic, dropping the meal box before the old man could even grasp it. The meal box fell directly onto the cold concrete ground with a dry thud. The lid flew open, and the fragrant pieces of braised meat, the glistening white rice, scattered across the dirty ground, just inches from the old man's wheelchair. His only meal of the day, the small hope that had just kindled, was ruined in an instant. "Oops. Are your hands too weak?" Jack spoke up, his voice full of mockery, without a hint of remorse. He pointed at the food scattered on the ground, as if it were the old man's fault. "Do you know how much that meal box cost? What a waste." Not stopping there, Jack looked at John, and they exchanged a scornful glance. Then Jack stepped closer to the old man's wheelchair. He extended his foot, gently but decisively, and lightly pushed the old man's wheelchair. Just a light touch, but the old, rickety wheelchair rocked violently. The old man, with his frail body and poor balance, couldn't brace himself. His entire body tilted to one side, and he fell to the cold ground, landing beside the scattered meal. A gasp of pain was swallowed in his throat. The wheelchair lay overturned, its wheels spinning in the air, a symbol of his helplessness. Jack and John watched the scene, their faces showing no remorse, but instead a malicious smirk. "Now eat off the floor, old man." Jack said, his tone full of contempt and ridicule. "That's your meal, what a waste." Both burst into laughter, their cruel guffaws echoing in the space of the charity event, a jarring and brutal sound, completely antithetical to the spirit of sharing love the company sought to promote. The old man lay there, his body aching, but the greatest pain was the deep, bone-deep humiliation. He looked at the scattered meal, at the overturned wheelchair, and then up at the two mocking faces. His tears didn't fall, because the hurt was too profound, beyond endurance. He wasn't just denied food, he was denied respect, dignity, and basic human kindness. In that moment, he felt truly alone, a stain in the eyes of those who despised him. The two employees continued to laugh, seemingly relishing the absolute power they wielded by trampling on a frail, homeless man. Their callousness, hatred, and prejudice had blinded them, turning a charitable event into a cruel spectacle. The cruel laughter of Jack and John echoed in Walter Harris's ears, a mocking soundtrack to his humiliation. He lay sprawled on the cold pavement, his body aching, his overturned wheelchair a symbol of his shattered dignity. The scattered food, his only hope for a meal, lay mockingly beside him. He felt utterly broken, invisible, abandoned in a world that seemed to delight in his suffering. The indifference of the busy street, the silence of the large company building behind the gate, all amplified his sense of isolation. Just as despair threatened to consume him, a new sound cut through the air, a gasp of horror, followed by hurried footsteps. A young woman, Lucy, one of the newer employees, had been tidying up materials from the charity event on the side. The sudden, harsh laughter had drawn her attention. What she saw made her blood run cold. Her eyes widened in shock as she took in the scene, an elderly black man, frail and vulnerable, lying on the ground beside an overturned wheelchair and scattered food, while two of her colleagues, Jack and John, stood over him, still smirking. "What in God's name are you two doing?" Lucy cried out, her voice sharp with disbelief and immediate outrage. She didn't hesitate. Her concern for the fallen man eclipsed any fear of her colleagues. "He's a human being." She rushed forward, immediately dropping to her knees beside Walter. Her hands, though small, tried to gently maneuver his frail body, attempting to help him back into his wheelchair. But Walter's weight, combined with the awkward angle of his fall, made it difficult for her alone. She grunted with effort, her brows furrowed in concentration. Jack and John, momentarily startled by Lucy's sudden appearance, quickly regained their composure. Their smirks vanished, replaced by annoyance. Their cruel fun had been interrupted. "Mind your own business, rookie." Jack snarled, his voice losing its jovial malice and becoming sharp with authority. He stepped closer, towering over Lucy. "I'm your manager, Missy. Watch your mouth, or you'll be out of a job before you even get your first paycheck." The threat was clear, delivered with a chilling certainty. John, equally annoyed, crossed his arms. "This isn't your concern, Lucy. Just go back to what you were doing." "Now," he ordered, his tone dismissive and condescending. Lucy paused, momentarily taken aback by their aggression and the direct threat to her job. A flicker of fear crossed her face. She was new, still on probation, and losing this job would be devastating. But then, she looked down at Walter, who was trying to push himself up, his eyes filled with pain and humiliation. The sight ignited a fierce resolve within her. This wasn't just about a job, it was about basic human decency. She stood her ground, looking up at Jack and John, her eyes blazing with indignation. "You're not helping him up," she retorted, her voice trembling slightly but firm. "If you don't help him right now, I'll report this to senior management. I'll tell them everything." Jack and John exchanged a look, and then burst into another round of loud, mocking laughter. The idea that anyone would care about an old black man was utterly preposterous to them. "Go ahead, little girl." Jack jeered, waving his hand dismissively. "Tell whoever you want. Who cares about an old black man anyway?" John snickered beside him, equally confident in their impunity. They were convinced that Walter's race and homeless status made him invisible, and any complaint on his behalf would be easily dismissed. Their arrogance was absolute. As their callous laughter filled the air, a profound sense of tension permeated the scene. Walter, still on the ground, closed his eyes, bracing himself for more humiliation. Lucy, her face flushed with anger and desperation, was about to argue further when a new voice, deep and authoritative, cut through the escalating confrontation. "What is going on here?" The laughter of Jack and John instantly died. All three employees, Jack, John, and Lucy, froze, turning as one towards the voice. Standing at the entrance of the company building, having just stepped out into the late afternoon light, was the company director. He was a tall, imposing man, impeccably dressed, with a stern yet thoughtful countenance. He had emerged from a late meeting, expecting to see the last vestiges of a successful charity event. Instead, he was met with a scene that made his blood run cold: an elderly man sprawled on the ground, an overturned wheelchair, scattered food, and three of his employees engaged in a heated argument. His eyes narrowed, a look of profound shock and disbelief settling on his face. He was utterly speechless, the kind of silence that precedes a storm. "What is this chaos?" the director demanded, his voice low but filled with controlled fury. Lucy, despite her lingering fear of losing her job, didn't hesitate. The director's presence was her only chance for Walter. She quickly recounted everything she had witnessed, her words tumbling out in a rush of indignation: the cruel remarks about Walter's race and cleanliness, John's deliberate dropping of the food, Jack's callous shove that sent Walter tumbling. She described their mocking laughter and their refusal to help, concluding with their dismissive comments about no one caring about an old black man. As Lucy spoke, Jack and John's faces, which had initially paled, quickly regained a smug confidence. They exchanged quick, conspiratorial glances. They knew Lucy was new, easily intimidated. They also knew the director's reputation for valuing smooth operations. "It's nothing, boss," Jack interjected, his voice smooth and falsely reassuring, trying to brush off Lucy's account. He and John quickly moved to action, putting on a show. "The old man just tripped himself. This young lady here is lying." As he spoke, both Jack and John swiftly bent down, their movements surprisingly agile. They quickly, almost expertly, helped Walter back into his wheelchair, then righted the chair. They offered him a hand, feigning concern, carefully brushing off his jacket, playing the role of helpful employees. Their sudden act of kindness was a blatant attempt to manipulate the situation, to present themselves as innocent bystanders helping a clumsy old man. The director watched their practice display, his brow furrowed in suspicion. He looked from Lucy, who stood wide-eyed and slightly disheveled, to the two seemingly helpful employees, then back to the still shaken Walter. He was a man of logic and facts, and this situation was filled with conflicting narratives. He needed proof. Just as the director was about to question them further, Lucy, seeing their attempt to deceive, interjected, her voice filled with desperate hope. Her eyes darted upwards, towards a small, inconspicuous dome fixed high on the company building. "The security camera!" Lucy exclaimed, pointing a trembling finger. "That camera recorded everything, sir." The director's eyes followed her gaze. Indeed, high above the main entrance, a large security camera silently monitored the entire area. A flicker of suspicion hardened his features. He looked from the camera to Jack and John, their faces now losing their smugness, replaced by a nervous tension. "All right," the director said, his voice firm, leaving no room for argument. "Get the technical team. I want that camera footage extracted immediately." Lucy, her heart pounding with a mixture of relief and trepidation, immediately pulled out her phone and called the IT department, explaining the urgency of the director's request. She waited, her breath held, for the confirmation. A few moments later, her face fell. Her eyes widened in disbelief and a crushing disappointment. She looked up at the director, her voice barely a whisper. "Sir, the technical team says, the camera, it's been malfunctioning today. The news landed like a lead weight. A collective, almost imperceptible sigh of relief escaped Jack and John. A sly, triumphant smirk touched their lips. They exchanged another quick glance, their eyes gleaming with malicious satisfaction. The camera was malfunctioning. What a convenient coincidence. They thought they were in the clear. They had escaped. They had gotten away with it. The old man, the new girl, they were powerless against their cunning. The smile of triumph on their faces was chilling, reflecting their belief in their complete impunity. The air hung heavy with a tense silence, thick with the unsaid thoughts of Jack and John, whose smirks of triumph had returned with the news of the malfunctioning security camera. They exchanged knowing glances, relief washing over their faces. They believed they had outsmarted everyone, that their cruel actions would remain unpunished. Lucy, however, stood devastated, her shoulders slumped, the hope she had desperately clung to now extinguished. Walter Harris, still in his wheelchair, watched the exchange with a weary resignation, the familiar pang of injustice settling in his heart. The director, however, was not so easily swayed. He was a man of integrity, accustomed to finding solutions where others saw dead ends. He watched Jack and John's barely concealed relief, their smug expressions confirming his deepest suspicions. A flicker of anger ignited in his eyes. He wasn't about to let this appalling behavior go unpunished, especially not at an event meant to embody his company's values. He looked around the company gate area, his gaze sweeping over the surroundings, searching for an alternative. His eyes darted from the now silent security camera to the parked cars, his mind racing. And then, his gaze locked onto something. "My car's dash cam," the director exclaimed, a sudden burst of realization in his voice. He pointed emphatically towards his own luxury sedan, which had been parked perfectly parallel to the company gate since early morning. The car was positioned in such a way that its forward-facing dash cam offered a clear, unobstructed view of the entire scene unfolding at the charity meal distribution point. The angle was absolutely perfect, it would have captured everything. Jack and John's faces, just moments ago alight with smug satisfaction, instantly drained of all color. Their eyes widened in horror. A dash cam. They hadn't even considered that possibility. Their supposed escape route had just slammed shut. Lucy's eyes, meanwhile, widened with a renewed, fierce hope. The director didn't wait. He immediately pulled out his smartphone, connected to his car's system, and navigated to the dash cam footage. The tension in the air became almost unbearable. Everyone present, the remaining charity workers, curious onlookers who had lingered, and especially the two guilty employees, held their breath. They knew this was the moment of truth. It took less than a minute. The director scrolled through the day's recordings, found the relevant timestamp, and then, the clip played on his phone screen. The small screen became a window into the recent past, unflinchingly displaying every brutal detail. First, the arrival of Walter Harris in his old wheelchair, a silent plea for compassion. Then, the clear shot of Jack's disgusted facial expression, the contempt in his voice audible even through the phone speakers as he scornfully remarked, "A black man? Be careful, he looks so dirty," and John's chilling agreement. The footage continued, capturing the moment John, with a look of revulsion, brought the meal box towards Walter, only to flinch and deliberately drop it onto the ground before Walter could even touch it. The meal, meant for a hungry man, scattered tragically across the dirty pavement. Then came the most damning evidence. The screen showed Jack stepping forward, his expression cold and calculating, as he casually pushed Walter's wheelchair. The old man, frail and unable to resist, toppled over, landing painfully beside his ruined meal. And then, the sickening sight of both Jack and John standing over him, laughing, their faces twisted in cruel amusement, Jack's voice clearly audible, "Now eat off the floor, old man. That's your meal, what a waste." The director watched the entire clip, his jaw clenched, his knuckles white as he gripped his phone. His employee's heinous acts, captured with such unforgiving clarity, left him utterly speechless for a moment. This wasn't just a lapse in judgment, it was pure, unadulterated malice. The charity event, meant to spread goodwill and kindness, had been desecrated by the very people representing his company. His face, usually calm and composed, was now a mask of profound disappointment and barely contained rage. He turned his gaze from the screen to Jack and John, who stood rigid, their faces pale, their eyes wide with fear and shock. All traces of their earlier arrogance had vanished, replaced by abject terror. "I organized this charity event to spread goodness and hope," the director's voice boomed, resonating with a power that silenced all lingering murmurs. His voice, usually measured, now carried the force of a thunderclap. "And you too, you have destroyed everything it stood for. You have shamed this company, you have shamed yourselves, and you have inflicted unspeakable cruelty on a human being." Jack and John immediately began to plead, their voices desperate and whiny. "Sir, please. We're so sorry. It was a mistake. Please, give us another chance." They tried to apologize, to make excuses, their hands clasped in frantic supplication. But their words were hollow, devoid of genuine remorse, merely a desperate attempt to salvage their careers. The director was unmoved. He looked at Walter, still in his wheelchair, his face etched with silent suffering, and then back at the two cowering figures. There was no room for forgiveness here, not for this level of cruelty and blatant prejudice. His decision was swift, unequivocal, and final. "Both of you," the director declared, his voice ringing out like a judgment, leaving no room for appeal. His eyes were cold, resolute. "You are both fired. Immediately. Get off my property. Now." The words hung in the air, a final, crushing blow. Jack and John flinched as if struck. Their desperate pleas died in their throats. They tried to protest, to beg, but the director's gaze was unyielding. Defeated, humiliated, and utterly exposed, they could do nothing but turn and slink away, their faces a picture of utter despair, leaving behind the shame of their actions. The immediate aftermath was a stunned silence, broken only by the soft, rhythmic whir of Walter's wheelchair as he slowly, almost imperceptibly, shifted his weight. The atmosphere, once thick with tension and malice, now began to clear, replaced by a sense of justice, albeit a harsh one. Lucy looked on, a mix of relief and awe on her face. The director, however, was not finished. He still had a profound apology to make. The echoes of the director's booming voice, firing Jack and John, still resonated in the air. The two disgraced employees had slunk away, their arrogance replaced by utter humiliation, leaving behind a sudden, almost eerie silence. The small group of remaining charity workers and curious onlookers watched the scene unfold, a mix of shock and dawning realization on their faces. Walter Harris remained in his wheelchair, still recovering from the physical and emotional assault, but a fragile sense of calm was beginning to settle over him. Lucy stood beside him, her initial fear giving way to a quiet awe for the director's decisive action. The director, his face still grim from dispensing justice, now turned his full attention to Walter. The fury he had shown towards his disloyal employees was replaced by a profound sense of shame and humility. He took a step closer to Walter, then, in a gesture that stunned everyone present, he bowed his head deeply. It was a bow of genuine respect, of deep regret for the appalling treatment Walter had received at the hands of his company's representatives. "Mr. Walter Harris," the director began, his voice no longer booming, but soft, laden with sincere remorse. I am truly, deeply sorry for what you have endured today. On behalf of my company, and as a human being, I apologize for the cruel, discriminatory, and utterly unacceptable behavior you were subjected to." He looked up, his eyes filled with a raw, honest concern. "Are you all right, sir? Are you hurt? Do you need to be taken to a medical facility?" His concern was palpable, a stark contrast to the callous indifference Walter had faced moments earlier. Walter, who had braced himself for indifference, was momentarily taken aback by the director's profound apology and genuine concern. He slowly shook his head, a faint, weary smile touching his lips. "No, sir," he replied, his voice a little hoarse, but steady. "I'm all right. Just a little shaken." Lucy, still standing by Walter's side, now spoke up, her voice gentle and compassionate. "Mr. Walter, where do you live? Can I take you home?" She felt a strong urge to ensure his safety and comfort, to somehow make amends for the terrible ordeal he had just suffered. Walter looked at Lucy, then at the director, his eyes, which had remained dry through all the insults and humiliation, suddenly welled up. A single tear, then another, traced a path down his wrinkled cheek. The kindness, the genuine concern, after such an outpouring of hatred, finally broke through his stoic facade. "Home," Walter whispered, the word seeming foreign on his tongue. He let out a shaky breath, then, his voice thick with emotion, he admitted, I don't have a home." The director and Lucy exchanged a look of shock and profound sadness. A man of Walter's age, in a wheelchair, homeless. The reality hit them hard. Walter continued, his voice gaining a quiet dignity as he recounted his past. "In my youth, I was a soldier. I dedicated my life to defending this country, to protecting our freedoms." His gaze drifted into the distance, perhaps seeing specters of a past battlefield. "And now I am, homeless." The contrast was heartbreaking, a man who once protected a nation, now abandoned by it. As he spoke, Walter slowly reached into a small, worn cloth pouch he kept hidden beneath his jacket. With trembling hands, he pulled out a small, metallic object, wrapped carefully in a faded piece of silk. He unwrapped it, revealing a gleaming medal of honor. The light caught its intricate design, the five-pointed star suspended from a blue ribbon, symbolizing courage beyond the call of duty. "I was a Marine Corps sergeant," Walter said, his voice soft but clear, imbued with the solemnity of memory. He looked at the medal, then at the stunned faces of the director and Lucy. "This medal, it represents my fallen comrades. The ones who didn't make it back. I carry it for them." The director was speechless. He had known Walter was a veteran, but a Medal of Honor recipient? A Marine Corps sergeant? The highest military honor. This man, whom his employees had dared to call dirty and useless, was a national hero, someone who had sacrificed his youth, his very well-being, for the country that now seemed to have forgotten him. The irony, the sheer injustice of it, was almost unbearable. "Sergeant Harris." The director finally managed to say, his voice choked with emotion, his eyes glistening. "Thank you. Thank you for your service. Thank you for all that you sacrificed so that we could have the life we have today." His words were filled with a profound respect, an acknowledgement of a debt that could never truly be repaid. The sight of a decorated war hero, reduced to homelessness and subjected to such cruelty, tore at his conscience. A sudden, powerful thought struck the director. This was more than just a public relations crisis, it was a moral imperative. This was an opportunity to right a terrible wrong, not just for Walter, but for his own soul, and to teach a vital lesson to his own children. He took a deep breath, then looked at Walter, his eyes filled with genuine warmth and determination. "Sergeant Harris," he began, his voice gentle but firm. "If you wouldn't mind, I would be honored if you would come and live with my family." He saw Walter's eyes widen in surprise, a glimmer of disbelief. "I need my children to learn a crucial lesson, respect, without discrimination. They need to see a true hero, to understand what real sacrifice means. And my home, it would be honored to have you." Walter stared at him, his mouth slightly agape, tears now streaming freely down his face, a mix of disbelief and overwhelming emotion. "Truly," he whispered, his voice trembling. You mean it?" The director smiled, a warm, genuine smile. "Yes, Sergeant, I mean it. If you don't mind living with a family who would be deeply honored to have you." At that moment, the dam of Walter's long-held pain and loneliness finally broke. He burst into sobs, tears of pure joy and relief. "From today, I have a home, he cried out, his voice choked with happiness, the words a balm to a soul that had yearned for belonging for so long. The sight of this proud, strong veteran weeping tears of joy over the simple offer of a home touched everyone present. The director's smile broadened, a profound sense of rightness settling over him. He looked over at Lucy, who stood nearby, her eyes also shining with tears of happiness. Her quick thinking and courageous intervention had been instrumental in uncovering the truth. "Lucy," the director said, his smile still wide, "starting tomorrow, you're a permanent employee. My company welcomes people like you. People with courage and a true heart." Lucy's face lit up, a radiant smile replacing her earlier anxiety. She had stood up for what was right, and it had led to an outcome far beyond her wildest hopes. The late afternoon sun now cast long shadows across the company gate, but the atmosphere was no longer cold or harsh. Instead, a feeling of warmth, hope, and true human connection filled the air. Walter Harris, the forgotten hero, had found a home. And in doing so, he had reminded everyone present that true kindness and respect know no bounds, no color, no social status. The charity event, though marred by initial cruelty, had ultimately fulfilled its true purpose, spreading love and hope in the most unexpected and profound ways. Thank you so much for listening. If you have any thoughts or opinions about this story, feel free to leave a comment below. I'd love to hear what you think. And if you enjoyed it, don't forget to give it a like and subscribe to our channel to support us. Your support means the world. Thank you again.